Okay, hi there everyone. So in this video we are looking at the electron transport chain and oxidative phosphorylation, which are kind of sort of two parts of the same process, and this is the final stage of cellular respiration. Okay, so the purpose of the electron transport chain is to generate a hydrogen ion gradient. And the reason we need the hydrogen ion gradient is because we use it to turn ADP, an inorganic phosphate, into ATP. So this ATP generation is the ultimate goal of cellular respiration. And at the end of oxidative phosphorylation in the electron transport chain, we end up with around 32 molecules of ATP. So a huge amount comes from this stage compared to what we got from the Krebs cycle and from glycolysis. So if we need to build up a hydrogen ion gradient, we need hydrogen, and that hydrogen is coming from the reduced hydrogen carriers that we made in our previous stages of respiration. So from glycolysis, the link reaction, and from the Krebs cycle. So these reduced hydrogen carriers can provide the hydrogen ions which can make a gradient. And then once we've got a gradient, those hydrogen ions are able to move through our ATP synthase molecule. So this is ATP synthase. So it's an enzyme, and when hydrogen ions move through that movement is able to provide the energy to combine these two together to get our ATP. Okay, so how do we get our hydrogen ion gradient? There's much more detail to it. We need to look at that now. Okay, so first of all we have to have a membrane. Now this is not the cell surface membrane. This is the inner mitochondrial membrane. Okay, so mitochondria have got two membranes. In fact, let me just draw it quickly down here. So if you imagine that here is our mitochondria, there's the outer membrane, and then the inner membrane looks like this, with all these folds on it which are called cristae, like that, something like that. So this is our outer membrane, this line here, and this line is the inner membrane. So this double line here, this whole thing is just this single, that's what this inner membrane is, okay? I've drawn it as two lines because of course it's a phospholipid bilayer. So the electron transport chain, all of the ATP synthase molecules are on this membrane in the mitochondria. So there it is, okay, there's our ATP synthase molecule. And what we also have on the membrane are other proteins or protein complexes. So what we've got here is a protein complex. It's not a straightforward channel, but I've just drawn it like that to show you what's going to happen. And hydrogen ions can move through this protein complex over to here. This part here is where the hydrogen ions are going to build up. That's where we're going to have a high concentration of hydrogen ions. And this, on this side of the membrane, this is the space in between the two membranes. Okay? So this part here is this part here. Okay, this is the space, the intermembrane space. Okay, I'm just going to get rid of that. So now we know where this is happening. We know that our hydrogen ions need to move through here into the intermembrane space, and those hydrogen ions come from our reduced NAD or our reduced FAD from the other stages of respiration. So reduced NAD can be oxidized to form NAD. When that happens, to be oxidized, this reduced NAD has to give up its hydrogen, and that hydrogen consists of protons and electrons. So the protons can to make our gradient, and the electrons also go up into this protein. The electrons can go to different energy levels. So now that we've got an electron here held in a particular place, what can happen is that that electron can actually move from this protein complex down to a protein complex next to it. And when it moves from one to the other, it actually moves down an energy level. So by moving from here to here, the electron has lost energy. That energy is used to pump the hydrogen ions across the membrane into the intermembrane space. We then have another respiratory complex or protein complex in our membrane. And so this electron could move down here, but also we end up with reduced FAD, which can also enter the electron transport chain. So when it becomes oxidized, hydrogen ions are released and electrons are released. And those electrons can also then be passed on to the next carrier, releasing energy. So each time electrons get moved from one electron carrier or protein complex to the next, energy is lost. And the energy that's lost when the electrons move from one energy level to the next is used to move hydrogen ions across the membrane. So therefore, we end up with lots of hydrogens, a very high concentration of hydrogen ions in the intermembrane space, as a result of the movement of electrons along the electron transport chain. Okay, so now chemiosmosis can happen. Chemiosmosis is when we've got an electrochemical gradient, which means a high concentration of ions here and a lower concentration down here. So oxidative phosphorylation is the idea that we're going to phosphorylate ADP to form ATP, and we need oxygen for that to happen. So our hydrogen ions are going to move through the ATP synthase, and the electron is going to combine with oxygen. Now the reason that has to happen is if the electron, if I just go back, if the electron just stays here in this electron carrier or respiratory complex, then there's no space for the electron from here to move. So the electron here has to stay there, which means the electron here can't move, and the electron here can't move. So as long as this electron stays here, this whole electron transport chain is going to stop working. And if the electron transport chain stops working, hydrogen ions have got no energy to be moved through, and everything's going to stop. Our hydrogen ion gradient will not be formed. So we have to remove this electron, which means it has to be accepted by something else. And the thing it's accepted by is oxygen. So we say that oxygen is the final electron acceptor. Hydrogen ions that have moved through the ATP synthase also join with the oxygen and the electrons. And when you've got hydrogen and oxygen combining, you get water. So water is a product of oxidative phosphorylation, and it's actually a waste product. So this water actually is removed from the cell and excreted. If we're going to do this properly, we would actually have to say that half of an oxygen molecule combines with 2 electrons and 2 protons to make 1 molecule of water. So that's oxidative phosphorylation, because oxygen is needed to be the final electron acceptor, and by doing that it allows the hydrogen ions to pass through the ATP synthase, which provides the energy to phosphorylate ADP and generate our ATP. So it's oxidative phosphorylation. Okay, that's it.